Good evening. The three core leaders of Occupy Central have surrendered to police on day 67 of the campaign for greater democracy. After filling in forms, officers told them they were not under arrest and should return home until further notice. Emily Seo reports.
There was a large crowd as Occupy Central leaders, law professor Benny Tai, sociology lecturer Chan Kin-man, and clergyman Chi Yu-ming arrived at Central Police Station in Sheung-wan at around 3 this afternoon. They were there to turn themselves in for taking part in the pro-democracy protests, which have paralyzed parts of the city for the past 67 days. Outspoken Catholic leader Cardinal Joseph Zen and 13 Democratic Party members, including lawmaker Wu Chi-wai, also surrendered themselves. Before heading in, Tai instructed his supporters to fill in a form which included their personal information and a single charge he advised them to plead guilty to, participating in an unauthorized public assembly. The trio bowed and thanked everyone who helped and supported them. There were cheers and jeers as they and Zen stepped inside the station. A group headed by pro-Beijing activist Letitia Lee denounced the Occupy trio. After an hour, Tai and the others emerged and gave an account of what happened.
We provide our personal information to the police officer, and after they have checked our ID card number, we have been taken into a room, and they have taken down our personal information again, and also in a specially designed form with a list of possible offenses that we might have committed.
Tai said the list included organizing, participating, and inciting others to join an unauthorized assembly, criminal damage, and obstructing officers from carrying out their duties. The law professor confirmed he only admitted to taking part in an unauthorized assembly. They were then told to go home.
Later, we may be arrested and even we may be prosecuted for more serious offenses, and I think we still have to wait and see.
The Justice Department has authorized Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, David Leung, to handle Tai's case to avoid any possible perception of bias or improper influence. That's because both Justice Chief Rimsky-yoon and Public Prosecutions Director Keith Yeung have known Tai for many years and all were classmates at the University of Hong Kong. Apart from prominent figures in the pro-democracy movement, some ordinary citizens who support the umbrella movement also surrendered themselves. This man said he hopes by doing so he can help stop the more radical elements among democracy supporters. Another man said he feels morally bound to surrender since police classified water bottles, masks and umbrellas, all of which he carried and used during the protests, as weapons. The Occupy trio used the occasion today to urge student activists who have replaced them as the leading figures of the pro-democracy campaign to end their mass sit-in. But the advice has been rejected so far, with Scholarism, the Federation of Students, and pan-Democrat lawmakers all vowing to continue the street seizures until the government gives them a positive response to their call for greater democracy.
The Occupy trio's decision has been welcomed by both their opponents and supporters. While the democracy camp believes that it's time to take the campaign to a new phase, pro-government backers say enough is enough. People from all sides of the political spectrum welcomed the move by the three Occupy Central leaders to surrender to police today. But pan-Democrats said the pro-democracy camp will have to look ahead to the next stage following the decision by the group Occupy Central with Love and Peace, or OCLP.
In fact, the pan-democratic camp, of course including the Civic Party, respect the decision of the OCLP trio to turn themselves in today. Their retreat, of course, would start people thinking now, if not before, how the umbrella movement ought to be heading in the next stage. It is important for us to find a way to take stock of the sympathy that we have gathered, the people that we have mobilized, so that such resources, such sympathies, and such understanding would not be lost
Outspoken pro-democracy advocate and media mogul Jimmy Lai, who was at the police station to show support for the Occupy trio, agreed. I think turning themselves in is a rational move, Lai said, but I wouldn't follow them until the students decide to retreat or are arrested by police. Anti-Occupy leaders, meanwhile, are urging other pro-democracy demonstrators to follow the trio's lead.
I think it is a clear case of they are surrendering, and this is a close of the Occupy Central, the ugly chapter comes to an end. What I'm trying to do now is I'm hoping to make an appeal to all those who are in Causeway Bay as well as in Queensway. Maybe if they wait a little bit longer, next week the injunction order will be carried out and there will be more arrests, maybe bloodshed if they decide to fight. And there is really no point in going on any further.
Pro-Beijing heavyweight Elsie Leung praised the Occupy Central leaders' decision to surrender, saying it shows their respect for the law. She hoped their action can encourage other protesters to leave the streets and go home. 2 days after beginning a hunger strike, protest leader Wynna Wong and 2 student activists have vowed to drink only water until the government meets them for talks on political reform. In an open letter to the chief executive, the trio warned that clearing protest sites by force will not resolve Hong Kong's political stalemate. Here's Emily Sue.
Prominent protest leader Wynna Wong and 2 members of his student activist group Scholarism have vowed to continue their hunger strike until the government returns to the negotiating table to discuss the current political stalemate.
We just try to show our stand, to persist on our value on fighting for true universal suffrage in the umbrella movement.
As temperatures across the city fell below 20 degrees Celsius, the 3 teenage hunger strikers appeared before the cameras at their protest base in Admiralty to read out an open letter to Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying. Mr. Leung, please don't be mistaken that clearing us out by force will solve the problem. The chief executive has called on protesters to leave Admiralty, but Wong warned they will return in their tens of thousands when the so-called Umbrella Square sit-in area is cleared. Addressing the possibility of injuries during a removal operation, he said the SAR government simply cannot afford to lose any one of its young people. The trio appeared frail today after they stopped eating on Monday night. But Wong insisted that they will continue to drink only water, even though his blood sugar level has dropped below the normal rate, and fellow hunger striker Prince Wong threw up twice. He hopes their pledge will help convince the Hong Kong public and the rest of the world that they're serious about the fast.
For foreign government or different country, we hope them to give more concern to the umbrella movement in Hong Kong.
Wong did not rule out the chance of more members of scholarism joining the hunger strike.
A Hong Kong man who was expelled from a Taiwanese university has been arrested on suspicion of murdering his landlord. Initial investigations suggest that the victim was killed in a rent dispute. Joyce Wu reports.
Police in Taipei are questioning a Hong Kong student accused of killing his landlord. The 22-year-old surnamed Mac reportedly admitted he killed the man after a rent dispute. CCTV footage released by police shows Mac carrying a rubbish bag said to contain blood-stained shoes and the victim's wallet. The body of the 70-year-old landlord was found wrapped in a mat on the balcony of the second-floor building yesterday. Police said the victim was hit on the back of his head and suffered a deep cut in his chest. The suspect had been renting a flat in the Yangmingshan area since 2011. Flats in the building where Mac lived are mainly rented to university students. But he is said to have been expelled from the Chinese Culture University last year and stopped paying his rent in September. After finding the body, officers cordoned off the area and launched a manhunt which ended with Mac's arrest. Joyce Wu, ATV News.
Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou has stepped down as chairman of the ruling Kuomintang, which was badly defeated in local elections at the weekend. Although an acting chairman has been appointed, the party will hold fresh elections next month in a bid to revive its fortunes. Joyce Wu reports.
Taiwanese President Ma Ying-jeou resigned as chairman of the ruling Kuomintang after accepting responsibility for its crushing defeat in local elections last weekend. Speaking today in front of delegates from the KMT's Central Standing Committee, Ma said he was deeply ashamed of the losses, which plunged the party into its deepest crisis in a decade. I want to apologize to all our supporters, he said. I let the founders of the party down. I am ashamed. I let everybody down. The KMT's devastating defeat reflected the public's dissatisfaction with its China-friendly policies, which led to stronger cross-strait economic ties. But many on the island were uneasy about the relations, and in March, thousands of protesters blocked the ratification of a trade services agreement in an unprecedented sit-in in Parliament. That protest was seen as a signal of the KMT's growing unpopularity, and this was confirmed when the party was trounced in several mayoral races, including the capital, Taipei. Vice President Wu Dianyi has been appointed acting KMT chairman until next month, when elections for party posts will take place. Despite his resignation as KMT chairman, Ma will remain president of Taiwan until his second and final term ends in 2016. Joyce Wu, ATV News.
Overseas rights groups are calling on the Indian government to bring to justice the U.S. chemical company responsible for the industrial accident in Bhopal 30 years ago. Nobody has ever been to court to answer for the disaster, which killed nearly 30,000 people and left generations with birth defects. Ben O'Rourke reports.
On the night of the 2nd of December 1984, a Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, leaked 30,000 tons of gases, including cyanide and other chemicals, in the world's worst industrial accident. Around 500,000 people were exposed to the toxic substances, which killed over 3,500 in a matter of hours, and another 25,000 since from related illnesses like cancer.
Unfortunately, it's not a tragedy of 1984, it's a tragedy of 2014. That, 30 years on, you have some of the poorest communities in Bhopal having to live with ill health, without cleaning up of the toxic waste, without having got adequate and fair compensation. So, this is a travesty, it's not just a tragedy, as far as we are concerned.
Even now, 3 decades after the disaster, many children are being born with deformities.
There's still the question of providing rehabilitation and health monitoring to children who are being born disabled due to the gas disaster. So many injured, not a single individual or corporation behind bars.
Every year there are fresh calls for justice for the thousands of victims, but little has happened.
Both US and Indian residents, in fact 80% of Indians and 60% or so of Americans, want that Dow Chemicals and Union Carbide actually submit themselves to the Indian legal process, that they show up on the courts. As you know, they haven't come despite 6 occasions when they've been called. So 30 years on, not a single American has been brought to book.
5 years after the disaster, Union Carbide paid $470 million in compensation to the victims. But almost 90% of those suffering lifelong injuries received less than $500 each. Warren Anderson, who headed Union Carbide at the time of the Bhopal tragedy, died in the US in September after escaping extradition to India. Protesters in India are now calling on Prime Minister Narendra Modi to do something for the people of Bhopal. But critics noted that he has been personally inviting foreign investors to India. In 2008, while governor of Gujarat state, Modi allowed Dow Chemicals, which bought Union Carbide, to build a chemical plant in Dahej. Ben O'Rourke, ATV News.
The Ukrainian government says there's been an accident at a nuclear power plant in the southeast of the country. Officials say the accident occurred at a 1,000 megawatt reactor at the Zaporozhye nuclear facility. However, they denied that the problem was linked to existing issues with the national power grid and insist it posed no danger to anyone. The plant will resume its normal operation on Friday. Ukraine is home to the Chernobyl nuclear plant, which was shut down after a high-profile disaster in 1986. Turning to sports, it was a day of mourning for Australia today as some of the biggest names in cricket joined thousands of locals to pay their last respects to batsman Philip Hughes in his hometown of Maxville. Raymond Young reports.
Grief and sorrow filled the small town of Maxville this morning as it bid farewell to local hero Philip Hughes, who died last week after being struck in the head by a bouncer during a domestic cricket match. Prime Minister Tony Abbott joined cricket legends, including Shane Warne, Brian Lara and Ricky Ponting, at the funeral held at Maxville High School. Thousands of mourners gathered, and those who could not get a seat watched the emotional service as it was televised on giant screens. Inside the hall, Hughes' teammates listened to eulogies delivered by the late star's family members.
There won't be a day that goes by that I won't think of you. I promise I will talk to you every day and keep you company up there. You always protected me and stood up for me when need be. I love you, big brother.
Australian captain Michael Clarke, a close friend of Hughes, said the tragic accident has brought not just the nation, but the world together.
Philip's spirit, which is now part of our game forever, will act as a custodian of the sport we all love. We must listen to it, we must cherish it, we must learn from it. We must dig in and get through to tea. And we must play on. So rest in peace, my little brother. I'll see you out in the middle.
Australia's cricket chief also paid his condolences to Hughes' family.
To Virginia, Greg, Jason and Megan, I'd like to leave you with this. Ed Smith once wrote that cricket is possessed of a rich, poetic heart. For the cricket community today, that heart is heavy with sorrow. Cricket's heart has been pierced by pain, but it will never stop beating.
Hughes' father held back tears as he and other pallbearers marched out of the hall to the sounds of Elton John's song "Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me." Townspeople formed a guard of honor as the hearse passed through the streets. Back at Sydney Cricket Ground, where the tragedy took place last Tuesday, a line of 63 bats marking Hughes' final score in the fateful match was put in place as fans paid their final tributes. Crowds also gathered in Perth and Melbourne as the cricket-loving nation mourned the loss of a star.
Finance news, local share prices closed 1% lower in brisk trade. The Hang Seng Index dropped 225 points to end the day at 23,428. Turnover was $123.1 billion, the highest this year. Shares reversed early gains and headed south as money flowed to robust markets north of the border. Let's have a look at overseas markets, starting in the U.S. The Dow Jones is up 8 points. The London FTSE is down 8 points. The Frankfurt DAX is up 48 points, and the Paris CAC gained 13 points. Now over to U.S. dollar cross rates. It's 1.23 to the euro, 1.56 to the pound sterling, and it's 119 Japanese yen to the U.S. dollar. Now the weather. The first cold weather warning this winter is in force. People wrapped up today as temperatures plunged. The observatory issued the cold weather warning at 4:20 p.m., advising people to be prepared. The mercury is expected to drop to 11 degrees tomorrow and could fall to 9 degrees in the New Territories and on high ground. More rain on Friday, which will also be cold, but expect warmer weather over the weekend. Here's a look at the weather around the world. That's all the news for now. Thanks for watching ATV. I'm Wynna Wong. Good night.
Coming up, Newsline.